Mario & Luigi Brothership really doesn't have all too many bosses. In fact, it has the least amount of bosses in the entire series by a long shot, with only 12 bosses in the game. But even with that said, 12 is enough to definitely rank them from worst to best. And you might be a little surprised by my list, maybe you won't be, it's hard to say. But we are ranking every single boss in Mario & Luigi Brothership. No, we are not ranking any bosses that have to do with X versions, as they essentially are the same exact boss. I might show them off within their gameplay respectively, but overall it's the same boss but just a little bit harder and they hit a little bit harder. I also will not be separating different phases of bosses, instead they will all go in the same category for that boss. But I'll be ranking these on a multitude of factors, like how difficult the boss is, how engaging and fun was the boss, and all the different attacks that you had to dodge, but not just the fight itself, but also the atmosphere and the environment in which the battle takes place. It will all be a deciding factor based on what I end up choosing. But thank you guys so much for tuning in today. Stop what you're doing, make sure you leave a like and subscribe to stay up to date on all things Mario & Luigi and Nintendo in general. A lot of you watching this video right now are not yet subscribed, so do so. It'll only take a quick second. Thank you guys so much, and let's dive into the ranking. Starting off the list at number 12 as the worst boss in the game, we have Gobblick. This boss just didn't do anything for me. It was really basic as the first major boss in the game, and all of his attacks were incredibly easy to dodge. Very slow moving vines at the bros where you could easily jump or hit it with his hammer, and nothing felt that exciting. There is a Luigi's Logic moment where you have to spin them all Mario 64 and Bowser style, but it's also very basic. You spin him over to the other side just to get his weak point exposed, and you wail on him. And you're probably going to beat him relatively quickly as well. Like I said, the attack variety here is very weak compared to other bosses in this game, and I almost feel like the attacks are more along the lines of attacks that you'd find from overworld enemies instead. Number 11, we have the Great Conductor. This wasn't really a boss fight, it was more of like a training session to test the bros, but still, it was something that was very unique and I actually found it pretty enjoyable. You had to actually play like a little quiz as you were actually fighting the Great Conductor. He only had one real attack where he'd fall slowly from the sky and you hit him. It wasn't really that hard, but it was cool trying to focus on which one was the real Luigi based on your time with them through your adventure. You had to pay attention to which one was dancing the right way and which one was acting like the true Luigi, and you had to free that specific one from the cup in order to free him. It was pretty cool. I actually really enjoyed this, and for this being just a kind of test for the bros and not even like a real boss fight, I still really enjoyed it. Moving on to number 10, we have the Mega Snaptor. There's nothing super interesting about this boss. For the most part, it's really just a Snaptor, but big. And yes, there is a Luigi's Logic moment where you have to turn the pipes in order to get the water to make his weak point exposed, but for the most part he does everything that a regular Snaptor would do. He picks up things and throws debris at the bros, and also he stretches his neck at them, and the only new technique that he actually has is shooting tornadoes that you have to jump over. Overall, it's a pretty basic fight, and it just feels like a giant version of a basic enemy in this game. Number 9, we have 10 from the Extension Corps. Now, this was a fairly interesting mini boss type of thing. I actually really like this, and I feel like a lot of people kind of downplay it from being a really fun boss fight. His attacks are fun and quick, and he also uses other things such as Snapdoors flying in and throwing debris at the bros, and even has new attacks with the Snapdoors. For instance, they'll toss a giant log that both bros had to jump over. Trust me, I can definitely see people putting this fight a lot lower because there's nothing super interesting going on. There's no Luigi's Logic moments or anything like that, but I found his fight short and sweet, but also very entertaining. And he had a really entertaining fight that I loved with the whole mirrors around the bros, and you had to pay attention to which one was going to hit Mario and Luigi. This one was pretty cool. Next up, we have Gorrumbla, which is the first boss that you'll encounter in this game altogether. This boss was pretty good. In fact, it was really good for a first boss battle. It taught you how that sometimes you had to use your hammer for attacks, and sometimes you had to use the jump, and you had to base it on where he was guarding, whether it be the top of his head or the front of his face. He also had some really fun attacks to dodge, and the camera would change dynamically. For instance, when all the bricks would fall from the sky, the camera would pan behind Gorrumbla, which was a really cool different look for the game. And this Luigi's Logic moment is still one of the best in the game, honestly, in my opinion. Just Luigi flinging this rock and him throwing it back at Mario and having to time your button press to hit it back, all Mario baseball style. Such a great idea. And this moment just felt powerful and impactful as you're slamming this rock right back into his face. They actually did a really good job to start the game off with this battle. Next up, we have Sharpcask, and for a giant barrel, it's actually a really good boss fight as well. This one has you fighting this giant barrel who also chucks tons of barrels at you, but you have to pay really close attention to his attacks or you might not know what's coming next. He has barrel attacks where sometimes he'll bounce them at you and you don't need to jump, and sometimes he'll roll them when you do, and then eventually charge you himself, which means you constantly have to be on your toes for what's coming next. I think the thing with Sharpcask is his attacks are all extremely fast paced, where you have to keep up with his speed. He's just constantly moving, and then eventually X will come in and give him stat buffs like power up or defense up. Also, the Luigi's logic moment here is also a lot of fun. Stacking crates on top of his head in order to crush him is a really fun little mini game you get to play mid-boss battle. Not to mention the cool little Donkey Kong reference as he bounces and rolls down a flight of ramps, which is a really cool scene to see. And seeing the battle arena change as it takes place at a lower level now. At number 6, we had the Extension Corps. This was a fun battle with all 3 of the Extension Corps members fighting Mario and Luigi all together. They also have battle plugs and use similar status effects that Mario and Luigi can, but in their own twists and spins, which is pretty cool. For instance, preventing you from using any type of mushroom heal items, which will actually cause damage if you do. The main highlight of this battle is actually Tin. He has a variety of attacks that are pretty interesting, including old ones making a return and a new one where he'll actually single out each bro and hit them with tons of different attacks that you have to be ready for. I personally love these little 1v1 moments, and we'll see them return in future bosses as well, but man, this was such a good idea and it kept you on your toes the entire time. The other members play their roles too, where Shun is the heavyweight one in the group and tossing and throwing things at the bros and even boxing at some points in time, and X is the quick speedster that flies around the stage. But they'll also have like a trio attack, all Paper Jam style, where they will all do some sort of attack individually and you have to pay attention to who's attacking who, what's going on, and honestly, I was completely confused. I have absolutely no clue what I was supposed to be looking for, but after watching my replay of the game, I clearly see now, but it was just so much stuff going on at first. It's just absolutely insane. Finally, they equip a plug that makes them invincible, but that also means they detonate and lose all their health. This gives you around 2 or 3 turns to heal up as much as you can and equip anything that you need in order to survive the blast, which is not that bad. I mean, honestly, you could also throw in some plugs like Protectus to make sure that you deal no damage, but just with some right healing, you'll be okay. This was actually a fun, unique boss battle. My only complaint is that they kind of just wiped themselves out instead of us having to take out each individual one. Now down to the final 5. At number 5, we have Pipe Gunk, which is a giant gunky pipe that can turn from fire powers into ice powers, thanks to Shun and his remote in the background where he's able to move the stage in those respective regions. This completely changes the fight and changes the speed and the variety of his attacks as well, and this constantly had me on my toes. This was honestly one of the hardest boss battles in the game at the time, where I found myself constantly taking damage and didn't know what was going to come next. There was one attack where you had to keep jumping because the floor was so hot under the bro's feet, which was an attack unlike any that I've seen so far in the series. His normal form was probably the most difficult, as it had some very strange attacks with these weird squishy gunk balls that he would shoot at you. You would have to jump over them as they stretch out and bounce across the floor, and eventually he would come and bounce across the floor to both bros as well. It's just one of those attacks where it's just like there's no way in the world you're gonna dodge at all your first time you see it. With ice, his projectiles change and move a lot faster and differently than the fire version, and also he has a move where he'll charge you slowly but cover the screen in fog where you can't see. But for Luigi's logic moment, it's kind of basic this time around. I mean, you're just going to jump in the background and pull the remote with Shun and flip him over the ledge in order for you to change where you're moving the stage. At first, I was trying to overthink this, but you literally just move the stage to the opposite side. It's a pretty bland Luigi's logic moment, I can't lie. But overall, I thought Pipe Gunk was a really fun boss battle for this game. Coming in at number 3, we have Bowser. This was such a fun Bowser fight that incorporated a lot of his minions. It felt like they took a lot from his attacks from Bowser's Inside story, bringing in minions and strong fire-breathing attacks as well. But something else that I really did enjoy is the fact that he also has one-on-one moments with the bros. He'll go back and forth doing a variety of attacks that you have to be ready for and jump over. For instance, he'll ground pound in order to shake the floor and stun you, or he'll breathe fire, or he'll swipe his tail when his eyes glow. There's so many things and little tells that you have to look out for. Not to mention, one of the attacks from the Shy Guys is literally Shy Guy Says from Mario Party. I mean, that's just too good. And Bowser's attack variety here is massive. There's so many different moves that he'll do as he calls in different minions and parts of his army. There's lots of shell attacks that he'll use and even combine them with certain enemies like the Spinies in order to fling Spinies at the bros from the background. It's just all too good. And honestly, the minions make the fight as well, like the Koopa Troopas going into their shells with their attack and it backfiring, as you can play pretty much the classic bro shell attack from the past games. This is a fight that constantly had me on my toes, had a great atmosphere with Bowser's castle lined up in the background, just looked so good. It definitely had the difficulty, and it was one heck of a Bowser fight. Coming in at number 3, we have Zokket, which reminds me a lot of a kind of mixture of Antasma and even Cackletta to a point, using lightning-based attacks by lifting his weird stretchy hands that come out of his cloak, and you have to remember which bro's on which side as he flips him around and stuff. There's a lot of things that you have to pay attention to with this fight. I really love how the stage looks too. The atmosphere is all creepy and mysterious, and you're up on this giant fortress in the middle of the sky, and it's just kind of eerie. I love it. It almost gives me Partners in Time vibes at the very end of the game. But also his attack variety is so massive here. There's so many attacks that completely shift the perspective of the screen. For instance, he'll rain these electric orbs from the sky, and you have to pay attention to the right orbs that you need to swing your hammers at and hit. There's an attack where he'll fly up into the air and actually draw triangles around each bro in order for them to jump over this giant tsunami of energy. It's actually very difficult. Shoot, he even has an attack where he'll take one of the bros, at least for me, he took Mario, and actually Glomified him, making him actually fight against his own brother, where you had to reflect his hammer strikes, and you even had the opportunity to hit him at the end, and you can just savor it in order to not damage him and actually return him back to normal. It's such an amazing attack. I love that. Once again, this just reminded me so much of the Antasma fight, and it had the same energy to me. Such an absolutely great fight. My only complaint really is the fact that he didn't have his own boss theme. Coming in at number 2, we have the final boss of the game being Reclusa. Reclusa was really fun, and I actually thought this was one of the best endings to a Mario & Luigi game that we've ever gotten. My problem is, I don't think the actual battle was as good as one other boss on this list, but Reclusa is actually separated within multiple phases. The first phase is you'll have to fly around on this plug and shoot fire and ice respectively in order to knock down Reclusa, finishing him off with a giant bro bomb. But then this was only phase 1, where phase 2 he'll actually fly into the Solid Tree, which is the entire island itself. Now if this phase had more of us actually battling the tree instead of just defending ourselves, this could have been one of the best bosses that we have ever gotten. I mean, look how monumental this boss is. This is a job for Giant Luigi and Dream Team. This was so cool to defend attacks and a giant hand swipes and, you know, him firing down at you from the top of the tree. But at the end of the day, we're just fighting the plants at the base of the tree. And that was the kind of reason where I was like, man, why can't we actually battle Reclusa as a tree here? But then we move on to phase 3. Once we free Snoutlet from one of the plants, we actually get the plug again and get to ride up the base of the tree as well as we're firing fire and ice in order to reach the mouth of the tree and fly into the center. Once inside, Reclusa has imprisoned himself within the Weeping Core to protect himself from damage. Now, this is where, personally, I felt like they could have done a lot more. The attacks here weren't anything super special, and I felt like it was extremely easy, and that obviously is because I'm probably well overpowered here. Unfortunately, the game doesn't do much to prevent this, as if you want to complete this game, you have to do everything before you finish the game, and you have to complete every side quest throughout your journey, or they'll be gone forever. So I was with no choice but to be extremely powerful and pretty much obliterated this final boss. Once again, the camera angles here are spectacular, and it's some of the greatest angles and scenes in a Mario & Luigi game ever. That's what makes it so spectacular. The thing with the Weeping Core is once you use a bro's attack, it'll actually analyze it and remember it, so that when you use that same attack, it doesn't really do much damage at all, forcing us to use a variety of bro's attacks, which is a really cool concept. But after breaking the Weeping Core, out comes Reclusa. And once again, to me, this was the part of the fight that I felt was the weakest. I wanted a lot more out of Reclusa, and the attacks just felt very safe and bland. Duplicating himself and just tossing orbs at the bros. It was stuff that we've seen enough already. I'd say the most unique attack was one that just genuinely made me laugh, where he pretty much made Luigi incapacitated. And it took me back to the old games where one of my bros would always fall over and I had to grab them with one other bro and try to jump and hit attacks, which meant your attacks were a lot more laggier and you actually had to play with this attack. So it was pretty unique that they actually did this time around and actually made it like one of your bros died. But like I said, the attack variety here was pretty basic. With the ability to take us into a virtual world like the Matrix, I really expected something like that to actually transpire within the boss fight itself, but nothing, which definitely let me down a little bit. The final phase has us falling down a shaft as we power up and use our brotherly bonds in order to absolutely obliterate Reclusa in the face with our hammers, which was a really satisfying ending. But overall, I think the only thing that held it back was some of the variety of attacks that Reclusa had in that final phase. It was pretty basic overall, but overall, the ending all put together with all the phases was spectacular. But nowhere near as spectacular as number 1, Glohm Bowser. This was a fight, man. This was genuinely probably one of my favorite boss fights in the entire series. This takes the Bowser boss fight and heightens it to great lengths. I mean, seriously, this just felt intense. Once again, with an awesome battle arena, this time with the skies a deep dark red and lightning flashing everywhere and Glohm Bowser just looking creepy and terrifying as ever, this had the atmosphere to the core, with that creepy egg also in the background telling a story before we even figure out what it is. But also, Glohm Bowser has the ability to spread Glohm. He even calls in minions and henchmen in order to spread Glohm across the floor, which means you have to take Bowser out quickly before it spreads to the bros. Once again, Bowser will pull a dream team where he calls in a Shy Guy airship, where it will fire down at the bros and then eventually get weakened if you keep reflecting the shots back. This is when the game gets absolutely nuts. This is the best Luigi's Logic moment ever, where Luigi jumps into the airship in the background and pulls up Mario, and you literally change how the entire fight plays out. They'll fly away in the sky, and so will Bowser with his new Glohm air boots, whatever those are, but you'll have a little shoot 'em up moment where you have to fire at Bowser as he's chasing you in the sky. Like, let me remind you that this is still just a boss battle. This isn't a stage, this isn't a separate moment. We're in the middle of a boss battle still. This was so cool, man, and I love how it transferred to taking us outside of the fortress into this wasteland battlefield. Once again, just a beautiful atmosphere this game has. But with all the attacks that he had in his first battle, they just get cranked into overdrive. 10 times harder with even more attacks lined up that you've never seen before. I mean, there was just so much happening with this fight. With the atmosphere, the definite difficulty, because let me tell you, this was not an easy boss battle. This was probably one of the only battles in the entire game where I got knocked down multiple times and had to quickly heal. Thankfully, I never got a game over, but this would have been the boss battle to give me a game over for sure. Glohm Bowser was just so perfect for me. This was one of my favorite boss battles in the series now, and definitely goes down as probably the best Bowser boss battle in the series as well. We're just gonna have to go back and look and see if that's the case. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this ranking, let me know by leaving a like and subscribing, as a lot of you watching are still not subscribed. Also, let me know what you thought of my ranking down below and if you agreed or disagreed with my picks. But thank you so much for tuning in, and like always, I'll see you all on the next one. See ya, guys.